Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Becoming an Empowered Parent online series, offering expert tools for embracing imperfection, building connection, and creating more peace and joy within your family. I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you for taking this time. I am your host, Debbie Zeichner. I'm a parent coach, mindfulness facilitator, and licensed clinical social worker. And today I am so excited and thrilled to be joined by sleep coach, Jen Varela of Sugar Night Night. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. Jen is going to be talking with us all about toddler sleep strategies, a very hot topic. And before we dive in, let me tell you a bit about Jen. So over the course of the last decade, sleep coaching expert Jen Varela has helped more than 4,000 families find the sweet sleep they've been deprived of and desperately need. These families have benefited from her expertise at workshops and on phone consultations, and more than 700 of them in the US and around the world have achieved their sleep goals through private one-on-one coaching with Jen via her company, Sugar Night Night. Jen has also co-authored a book with Andrea Strang titled Love to Sleep, which is available as an ebook on Amazon. She is a member of the International Association of Child Sleep Consultants and a certified gentle sleep coach trained by Kim West, the sleep lady. She also trained with the Infant Mental Health Community Training Program, Hospital for Sick Kids. In addition to her work as a sleep coach, Jen serves as the California chapter liaison for the Postpartum Support International, which helps families dealing with perinatal mood and health disorders, and is past president of Postpartum Health Alliance. Jen is a mother of two and holds a bachelor's degree in human services with an emphasis in counseling from California State University, Fulton. So Jen, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So Jen and I have been friends and colleagues for years, and we've collaborated many times with families and parents that have been having both sleep challenges and behavioral challenges. And I'm just such a huge fan of her work. So it's so great to have her. Jen offers so many classes and workshops and resources, both locally and beyond, and is just an amazing person. So Jen, it's really, I'm really happy to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's dive in. So now we know a bit more about you professionally. I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit about you personally, your journey, and how you got into this work.
Yeah, so it was kind of an unexpected journey. I had thought I had wanted to go into a certain field, and then life happens and you do other things, right? And so I ended up having a company that I sold, and then I was a stay-at-home mom, which was like such a unique and wonderful, great experience. And I, when I had my son Zeb, he's now a teenager. He is that quintessential alert, like FOMO baby, like on, right? And I was actually dealing with postpartum depression and anxiety with both my miscarriages and both my pregnancies. And so for me, crying just just put me over the edge. I couldn't manage that. And I'm still very tear sensitive. And so I had figured out that if I got a 5-hour stretch of sleep, things changed. And most of my community was doing Cry It Out. And so I just couldn't do Cry It Out. And so I figured out another way to do it. And then I was pregnant with my daughter at my son's first birthday. So they're really close in age, and she's a completely different kind of sleeper. And so I had to kind of figure it out with her too. And that's what really started my journey, was realizing that getting sleep changes things and how important it is. And not everyone can do it, in this specific way. And that sometimes you have to get a little creative. And so I started helping friends, and friends are like, you should do this. And I'm like, is there a this? What is this? And then here we are 10 years later.
Wow.
So I think having struggled with it myself and understanding the significance of, mental health with that too. Right. And that's why I sit on the California State chapter for Postpartum Support International. I really work with a lot of families who are struggling with that. So sleep changes things when you're getting sleep. And so I just feel like I'm just so grateful I get to stand in a really intimate space with families and help them get things turned around. And it doesn't have to involve a ton of crying, right? So Yeah. So I work with age like expecting, so education and sleep shaping up
Mm-hmm.
to age 5. So
Great.
as far as, yep. So it's never too
Amazing.
late. It's never too late.
Then that's, I think that that's helpful for parents to hear, right? Because we always wonder, did I mess up my child? Is it too late? Can I go back? And so it sounds like there's always something to learn. And there is something really special when you've gone through it yourself and you really know it really helps you connect with the parents and the families that you work with. And I think that that's really important, and especially that you brought up how much sleep affects our mood. I think we forget about that.
Big
But
time.
it has just such a huge impact and on our emotional health. So
Yep.
thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for the work that you do in that area.
Yeah.
So before we dive into the most pressing, important questions that I know are on every parent's mind, let's first talk a bit developmentally. I'm wondering, like, especially in those toddler years, like what is happening developmentally during the toddler stage, especially with respect to sleep and sleep habits?
Yep. So one of the things I really find fascinating is how developmental leaps will have an effect on sleep. As well as how the brain is organizing awake windows and sleep cycles and how much sleep they need in a 24 hours. So when you look at what the National Sleep Foundation says about how much sleep they need in a 24 hours, I find that their window is really large. So they're going like from 13 months until the end of the second year. And they're recommending between 11 and 14 hours in a 24 hours. So what's happening is the amount of day sleep they need becomes less. The amount of time that they can be awake, especially between last nap and bedtime, gets a little larger. And so over time, they need less day sleep and they can do larger awake windows. So when you have like a 13-month-old, they are probably still taking 2 naps, or I hope that they are for your sake. And by the time they get to 2 years of age, they're down to 1 nap. And the awake window will shift from 4 hours that they can be awake to then 5 hours that they can be awake. And when I say they can be awake, yeah, they can be awake longer. However, when a little one is overstimulated and awake too long, cortisol kicks in, and cortisol is that stress hormone that gives them a second wind. And so there's also a correlation between too large of awake windows and increase in night awakenings too. So as they're progressing, the amount of sleep they need in the day gets less. The nights may or may not get longer. The overall sleep in a 24 hours as they get older becomes less. So that for 3 to 5 years of age, it's between 10 and 13 hours that they need in a 24. And so by the time they get to your 4th year of life, they're usually not taking a nap anymore, or they're starting to drop it.
And I remember that was such a huge thing when my kiddos were younger and they were dropping the nap. And I remember the nap was my break. Like I didn't want them to drop down. I wanted to hold on to that as long as I could. And then actually what I found is that when we did start to drop it, things opened up a bit, right? Like we had more flexibility, we could stay out longer. So it's kind of that like initial resistance, and then things eventually open up. So I know I get a lot of questions, I'm sure you do all the time, about 2 things in particular. One is kids who are early risers, who wake up just at the crack of dawn, and parents always say like, how can I get them to sleep in? And then also just knowing what time to put a toddler to bed, like what's an ideal bedtime. I wonder if you could speak to that a bit.
Yeah. So, based on the circadian rhythm, the best time typically for a toddler to go down is between 7:45 and 8:30, somewhere in there is typical. I will tell you there are larks and owls. There are some that like to go to bed late and they'll sleep late, and there's some that they're larks. They just are on the early side. So when I look at what is early rising, anything after 6 a.m. I'm not going to call early rising, even though that still feels very early.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I will tell you, my son was the quintessential lark. I could count on one hand the amount of times he woke up past 6:15 before the age of 10. Wow. And it wasn't until he was 14 that it was the first time ever he was the last one up for the day. Crazy, right? So kids have bents. So I think you need to take that into consideration. So when I give these general, this is what's standard or whatever, keep in mind that there's everybody has their bent, right? As far as how that goes. So With regards to early rising, so let's say it's before 6 a.m. I'm also going to say things will run in families too. So there are some, parents who are just like, yeah, I'm just naturally a morning person. Well, there's a good chance you may have a little morning person as your child too, right? So keep that in mind. So I'm not saying that they couldn't be getting enough sleep if they were waking up before 6. I'm just saying standard wise after 6 is really what's more considered acceptable morning start time.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at why they would wake early in the morning, there's several different things that could be factors. One is, I talked about that awake window too long will lead to cortisol, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is a correlation between too long of a wake window and early rising. So around 2 years of age, it's going to be about 5 hours that they can go between last nap and bedtime.
Mm-hmm.
At 3 years of age to 4 years of age, they might be between 5 and 5.5 hours that they can go. So just taking a look at that awake window could make a difference on the early rising. Another thing to consider is when you look at sleep in a 24 hours, pretend it's money. And let's say you have a 2-year-old and you know that 13 and a half hours is their complete total that they're going to get in a 24 hours, right? Mm-hmm. So if you looked at it as $13.50, if you spend 2 hours, $2 of that in naps, then what do you have left, right? As far as total sleep in the 24 hours. So if we go, that's, 12, 11, okay, right? So now you may have 10 and a half hours or 11 hours to go that you can have at night. So if you are putting a little one to sleep that you're only going to get 10 and a half hours at night and you put them to bed, at 7 o'clock, well, I think it's kind of unlikely they're going to make it to 6 a.m.
Got it.
That's another thing to consider is how much nap are they getting and how much are they really going to give you in a 24 hours? And are you expecting them to give you an 11 and a half hour night? That might not be realistic with how much sleep they're going to get in a 24 hours. So that's something else to consider is, are you placing the nighttime in the right place with how much sleep they're going to give you?
Do you have any strategies for those parents that have early risers, like things that you recommend that they can do or recommend that the kiddos do? I know that there's so many of those clocks that turn colors. Some those work for some kids, not for others. Do you have any other kind of tangible strategies?
That's where I'm just saying, be mindful of what you're expecting them to do. Are you expecting them to do 11 and 12 hour night? That might not be realistic if you're getting a good nap in the daytime. I do like the okay to wake light concept because it helps them know in the middle of the night, especially, oh, the light is not green. It's not time to get up yet. And it's not so intellectually stimulating on, should I yell out? Should I not? Will mom come? Will they not come? So I do like the okay to wake light piece as a tool. It won't solve all the problems, but it can help with setting some of those expectations that they know what to expect from you. So so the only other piece is just keep in mind that when a child goes through a developmental leap, so whether that's an 18-month-old who's working on language development, or it's a worldview change for a 3-year-old who has now a new sibling, you may see them spend more time in REM sleep, which means that's the shorter cycle of sleep. We do REM 30 minutes. It's where you see their little eyes go underneath their eyelids, their bodies make flinch or grimace, their faces make grimace. And this is where they are taking the information from the day and they're putting it into long-term memory. So after 3 a.m., we spend more time in REM sleep. So they may have more transitions, and sometimes nighttime parenting becomes something that they need. If they wake up from a dream that's kind of got them a little disoriented or a little like processing, they might need some nighttime parenting, a parent to come and help regulate them. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have bad habits or that you're spoiling them. They could be self-soothing at bedtime, getting enough sleep in the 24 hours, but having some weird night awakenings. It could be that they just need a little bit of help from mom and dad to kind of know that you're okay, everything's okay, and you're good, you can go back to sleep. So developmental leaps or worldview changes can create that early rising component. And then you start thinking, oh, like they don't know how to self-soothe or whatever. Maybe not. Maybe it's more related to they're processing some big information.
Got it, which makes a lot of sense, right? When they're about to stumble on some big developmental changes. So you brought up night awakenings. So let's go there.
Okay.
So I know that that's just something that drives parents crazy and they don't know what to do. So do you have some tangible tips and strategies for the night awakenings when the child just, feels afraid or wants to co-sleep and doesn't want to go back to bed, and that whole shuffle that goes on? What do you recommend parents can do?
So you always need to take a look at what is the answer you're giving them at bedtime. Because whatever you're doing for them at bedtime to fall asleep, that's what they're going to need or more at each night awakening. So I work with a lot of families who, choose to continue to say nurse even at 18 months, which is great. However, if there's a sleep suck association, so that as the little one is falling asleep, they're sucking to sleep, then in the middle of the night, are they going to be able to do with less sucking? Probably not. You're probably going to have to do the same thing, whatever you're doing for them at bedtime. I had one little guy, such cutie. His mom's little elbow skin was his lovey. So he needed to niggle that, right, to be able to fall asleep. So what would happen in the middle of the night? We'd have to, right? So I think the first piece is really take a look at, does your little one need assistance from you to fall asleep? If they need assistance from you to fall asleep, that's probably what they're going to need in the middle of the night. So taking a look at what is the association that they're having. 2 is that awake window. Make sure it's not too long, right? 3 is how much sleep are they getting in 24 hours, right? And then the last part is just to take a look at, what is your response to them when they wake in the middle of the night? Are you giving them it's a habitual, consistent response, right? That you always they just climb in, now all of a sudden you're co-sleeping together, and it wasn't by design, but by default. So there can be some habitual pieces that fall in there too. So if you were to have a little one who has the skills at bedtime, is going down independently, but you're getting that middle of the night visitor or awakening, if you're going through that little list, awake window, how much sleep in 24 hours, is there developmental leap happening, right? And what am I doing for them at bedtime? Has something snuck in? I had one family where humming had snuck in with dad, and he didn't even realize he was doing it. So sometimes these little things sneak in and we don't realize that we're doing. And has it become a habitual answer for them in the middle of the night? So if you have a little one who's self-soothing at night and it's because of developmental leap, I'm of the mindset, just get them back to sleep as fast as possible, any way you can, because once they satiate that information, that will go away. And sometimes that's a 2-day blip, and sometimes that's a few-week extravaganza. However, if it's not going away, you might have to reset at bedtime what's happening so that you can give a consistent answer in the middle of the night. So I've had that happen a few times too, where in order to get an answer that they're going to recognize in the middle of the night, you need to kind of reset the bedtime piece and the understanding of what the expectations are at bedtime.
What does that sound like? Yeah, what does that sound like? So I mean, do you recommend that parents, because I know so much of the information that I heard when my kids were younger, when the nighttime awakenings would happen, is that you'd walk the child back and then the child would walk back, and then you did this 100 times. So do you recommend that parents do that? And so that's one question. Then the other question is, what do you recommend that the message is at bedtime? What does that actually sound like? What does it look like and sound like?
Yeah. So I look at it from, what is their question first, right? Are you going to nurse me, rock me, hold me, touch me, be with me to sleep, right? And then what is our answer? And our answer can be, depending on how tired we are, how over it we are, it might be a variety of different answers. Maybe one night we go, okay, fine, I'll sit with you. And then the next night we're so exhausted we fall asleep with them. Then the next night you're like, no, we're not going to do this anymore. You go back to your room, right? So I think it's really important to take a look at, what is the answer that you're giving them? Is it an answer you can give consistently? And if it's not something you're happy for it to be the new normal and consistently, then you need to look at what your exit strategy is. And often doing a time in approach where you really take a look at, are they stalling all the time? It's all like, they want one last sip of the sippy cup and they want one last story. Well, maybe that's an indication that they're saying, this is too fast for me. Like, I need you to kind of slow this down. So when you think about a toddler who's at the park, if you don't give them the 10-minute, the 5-minute, the 3-minute warning, what do? Wah, right? Mm-hmm. So you are their park. They don't want the day to end, right? So meeting their need and creating a bedtime routine done in the same fashion, same order, that's not rushed, right? So somewhere around 30 minutes. I think once you get past 40 minutes, it's sort of like, is this playtime or is this bedtime? So I think somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes on the outside. And take a look at what are those things that they're using to stall with, right? So if it's always a sippy cup, well, why don't you just have a sippy cup there? Or if it's always, I want a snack, well, why don't you make that a part of the bedtime routine and you get that snack in and then finish the routine. So sometimes taking that time in approach instead of rushing them can take the battle out of it. And then you're able to say, okay, so what is my answer going to be as they actually fall asleep? So this is where there's not a bunch of talking going on anymore once the lights are out, because you want it to be clear where you are in your resolve of how things are going to exit. Because eventually you would like to be at a place where, I think most parents, if they're struggling with night awakenings, want those night awakenings to go away. That means the environment in which they fall asleep in needs to be the same that they wake up in. Otherwise, it's really stimulating because, wait, where did mom and dad go? So it's not that we're trying to get them ready to go to college at 3. It's just that we want them to be feeling safe and secure in their beds if you're not bed sharing, right? And for them to be in there on their own. So I really particularly like Kim West's method, the shuffle, for toddlers. And the reason why I like it is because you're building trust as you stay with the child until they fall asleep. And initially you're weaning off any of the touch that might be going on, like the little elbow stuff, right? And you provide them vocal support so that they can close their eyes. Because if they can hear you, they will close their eyes. If they can't hear you, they're going to stare at you to make sure you're there. And you're building trust and saying, I will stay with you until you fall asleep. And every 3 days you shift a little bit farther away. So now you're asking them, so your answer is, I'll stay with you until you fall asleep and I'll give you a little touch, but we're going to wean off of that. But no rush. You're not rushed. We're right here. We're good. Then your next answer you're giving is, I'm right here. I'm going to stay with you here until you fall asleep. And I'm going to provide you that vocal support, but I'm going to sit in this chair and you're going to stay in your bed. And then you move to the door, do the same. And then you move outside the door and do the same. And then you wean off the sound. And what's lovely about that is it gives them great imagery of mom and dad are sitting in that chair. And even if I can't see them, they're with me. So it really is a lovely method because you take the battle out of it. You're not, go to bed, no, go to bed, no, right? And you're not building up that battle experience, right? Instead, you're building trust.
And that can be done at bedtime and you're saying that can be done at bedtime if the child's having trouble just going to bed at night. And this is something that can also be done in the middle of the night. Yes?
Yes. And so what I'm suggesting is that let's say you have a little one that is self-soothing at bedtime, but you're having this middle of the night problem. If you were to automatically just go sit in the chair, they're not going to understand what it is that you're doing. So you may have to do a bit of a reset at bedtime in order for them to understand what your answer is in the middle of the night.
Got it.
And often I will have parents room share for a few nights so that they can instantaneously respond to the child's question with the shuffle. So they don't even have to get really stimulated, and it breaks that when I wake up, I need to wake up, right? Because that can become a conditioned response. Like when I wake up, I need to really wake myself up so I can wake mom and dad up so they can get in here. So if you can meet that need before they have to get all crazy about it, you can stop that initial conditioned response. I need to wake up. They can wake up in a little more relaxed state and then maybe put themselves back. So I even find room sharing for a period of time in order to give a quick, comforting answer that has a consistent answer. So you don't have to go all the way back to their bed, laying with them and laying down with them.
Mm-hmm. There's something too about, and I remember years ago, because my daughter struggled with this when she was younger. And I know for parents going through it, I know it feels like it's never going to end. And I remember just feeling so stressed and overwhelmed and exhausted. And it really felt like it was never going to end. I just have to say, eventually it will pass. It is a phase that will pass. And I think if we can just take care of ourselves in those moments and calm ourselves, I think it also helps that situation.
Oh, huge.
And I remember one of the pieces, just as you're saying, the importance of, rather than the child going into the parent's bed, there was something I remember hearing, and I think it's exactly what you're speaking to, the importance of the child being in their room, in their bed, and it's us that has to go to them. Mm-hmm. You agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So think of it this way. When you change your answer to the question, it's their right to go, hey, you changed your answer, and I'm not sure I'm so convinced you're going to stick with that answer. So the more consistent you can be with where it is that you want them to be. So if at the end is you want them in their bedroom, well, then you need to meet them in there, because when they come out, that leaves a lot of room and a very stimulus like mindset of like, oh, maybe they'll change their answer tonight. Maybe tonight's the night when I'll be actually staying in there. So the more you can be proactive to meet their need in their pace and give that consistent answer non-verbally, the better. Mm-hmm. Because the more you engage when lights are out with conversation, the more they're working on their intellect, trying to see if they can get you to change the answer. So the more non-verbal, consistent answer with empathy that you can give, then the faster it will go. And you got to remember, you did change your answer, and they are correct that you changed your answer. Mm-hmm. So if your response at that time, when they're trying to do all their antics to, we could talk about different stories on this, right? Because they're pretty creative in the ways that they look for, like, hey, are you going to give that answer? Or are you going to change that answer? Right.
Yeah.
If your response is, oh my gosh, I got to get this stop, baby, stop, like protesting and tantruming. This is taking too long. I'm so irritated, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to feel that.
Yeah.
If your response is, I know, buddy, you're right. I changed my answer. This is in your head. You're not saying this to them, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You tell me as loud as you want. I am listening, right? Mm-hmm. And I get it. Fair enough. But we're in this together and we can do this. And I'm going to be here with you while we make this change. Mm-hmm. They're going to feel that resolve. Mm-hmm. And so that's the key, is that when you know you have a plan and you know what your exit strategy is going to be, and you clock the time with that mindset of I'm here with you and it's empathetic. You need to remember that sleep's a learned skill. So if you've been doing a lot of work for them, they're gonna be a little bit uncomfortable. Just like how you learn to, when you go to those hotels, they have those big, huge pillows and you're like, who sleeps on these big, huge pillows? And in 5 days, what are you doing? Sleeping on the big, huge pillow or no pillow, right? So it's a little uncomfortable for them. So I think, you got to give them a little time to get their little system settled with how do they settle themselves. So I think it's really important to go at the pace that they can manage and be mindful of that. Be really clear, what is your answer? And is that something you can really follow through with, right? And then respond to them with that calm resolve and as many nonverbals as you can. Because there are some little ones, if you power up on them, they power up on you, and then all of a sudden it doesn't feel quite right, so we acquiesce, and then we end up reinforcing the behavior we didn't want, right? So now, we're giving them that like feedback. Yes, you just get a little crazier, a little louder, longer, harder, and it's going to work. Mm-hmm. And so you got to be careful that you don't take off more than you can possibly follow through with. So I find that nudging and scooching rather than one big giant step is in the end much more sustainable and successful than trying to just take it all on at once, and then you can't follow through because it's like right?
Yeah. Well, and I think, as you said, the empathy piece is so important, and I love your park analogy. I think that is brilliant because I always say to parents, sleep is the ultimate separation. right? I mean, all they want to do is connect with us, right? They want more than anything to connect. And when we turn, you know, imagining this like 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 18-month-old, whatever, young baby who is like in this room alone, lights out, their imaginations are taking over.
Oh
We're
yeah.
still figuring out how to differentiate fantasy from reality. It's like this whole new world comes up. I was working with when, that's when the monster spray comes out or the pterodactyl spray comes out. Like, we have to remember that development and what they're going through developmentally is it's scary for them. And so
Yep.
being able to really put our stuff aside. I mean, I remember for so long, I became so resentful. Like, this is my time and she's invading my time and I need my time. It was all about me. And once I just could like put that aside and really show up for her, that's when we started to actually phase out of it. And it was hard though, because we resist that, right? Because we parent all day long.
It feels like forever, right? So then we have our own parent tantrum, right?
Totally.
Yeah. So
totally.
yeah.
Yeah,
and
which is normal. It happens. We just have to be, I think that's where self-compassion really comes in. So what I started doing, I had to spend more time in my daughter's room. And that's when I started meditating again. Just like, this is what I have to really do it. I had to amp it up at that time and really have that compassion, which is really hard. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, keep in mind that you can put on your calendar when you're going to start and then what's your plan, right? So especially if you're using a shuffle and okay, every 3, maximum 5 days, I'm going to move. Well, if there's 3 positions in the room and then there's another position outside the room, right? Within a little over 2 weeks, you're done. So if you can mentally put your, all right, I'm going to follow through with compassion. I have a plan, right? So it might be you need to do some other strategies like, well, maybe this is where we need to have some DoorDash for at least the first 4 days. And maybe it's just not realistic to try and be doing the cooking, right? And get everything done that needs to get done and have the patience to do the bedtime routine. Maybe something else needs to be, for a short period of time, lifted out of your expectations for the evening so that when you get to that point when you're having to be there and be present with them, you're not going, okay, but I still need to get this done and this isn't done yet. And now, right? So looking at it, not just from the sleep training standpoint, but also like what needs to give, knowing you've got to like make this that priority for a short period of time to get the long-term shift, right? So yeah.
Absolutely. Because that ambivalence, right? The kids really pick up on that ambivalence. So I think that, and especially I always say, if there's 2 parents in the picture or 2 partners in the picture, they both have to be on board. If there's one, it's just really being ready for that, right? Really being ready to make that step is huge, because kids will notice when there's
got to get everybody on the same. You got to get everybody on the same page. Otherwise it does tend to fall apart. And that doesn't mean you have to be in complete agreement either. It might mean that you say, okay, I'm going to support you being the one that takes the primary role, right? It can also look like that too. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh, Jen, this is so good. Thank you so much. I know we could talk about this all day.
Yes, we could.
We could go on. There's so much more to talk about. So for those of you watching and listening, you'll have to follow Jen and just attend one of her classes and read some of her blog posts. I mean, she just does amazing work. So Jen, one question I want to ask you before we end our time today is, the series is all about becoming an empowered parent. And so I'm wondering, what does becoming an empowered parent mean to you?
Wow, isn't that like a thinker question, right? That's not just the like, oh, what do you like to do for, right?
What comes to mind, just whatever.
Yeah. So for me, when I feel that I'm at my best as an empowered parent, where I really feel like I'm being the parent, is when there's clear resolve on what my answer is going to be, and the empathy is easily accessible. So, and it takes a while sometimes to figure out what is my answer going to be, and am I really resolved in that? And also when I don't find that the urgent is taking over the important. I think that gets me too, when sometimes everything feels so urgent or has to, but that's not necessarily what's the most important. So I find that I'm at my best in parenting when it's the important is driving things, not the urgent. and that when my resolve is clear, so I can respond with empathy.
Thank you so much. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Jen, this was so wonderful. Can you let our viewers and listeners know where they can find you and where they can follow your work?
Yeah. Yeah, so my website is sugarnightnight.com. So N-I-G-H-T, N-I-G-H-T. It's what I say to my kids when it's time to go to bed, sugar night night. And I'm on Instagram, Sugar Night Night. I'm on Facebook, Sugar Night Night. I'm on LinkedIn, Sugar Night Night. Jen Varela, maybe it's Jen Varela on LinkedIn. And I do Sleep Talking Tuesdays. It's a free Q&A twice a month. So if you go to my website, you go to the calendar, that's a great way to get your specific question addressed. I do as many answers as I can in an hour, and it's first come, first serve. And then of course I do one-on-one coaching, and sometimes people just need like a 30-minute call, right? Just to kind of get some clarity, and I offer those too. So there's lots of different ways to get help. And then my book is with Andrea Strang is on Amazon. So you can find that there. Loved to Sleep. So, yeah.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
All right, be sure to check out Jen's work. She's got just amazing, as I said, she has some amazing resources and lots of answers to all your burning questions.
Yeah.
Well, Jen, I just want to thank you again for your passion, for your dedication, again, for being here, for sharing these amazing gems with us. Parents, I really want you to take some time to think about this conversation, use your journal to reflect on the discussion that we had today, writing down some of your takeaways, and maybe one thing that you want to try or that you want to commit to, especially if you're having some sleep struggles with your little ones. There's a lot of good gems shared here today. So again, Jen, thank you so much for being with us, for taking this time. All of you, I just want to thank you again for being here, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow for another day of the Becoming an Empowered Parent series. So bye for now. Thank you, Jen.
Yes.